Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe family of companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Tonight, we're getting a look at the work being done by Camp Pendleton Marines at the U.S.-Mexico border. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. They were deployed in January as part of a broader military border mission ordered by President Donald Trump. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer says their mission is simple.
Near the Otay Mesa port of entry, Marines continue their work reinforcing the two border fences. About 500 combat engineers have been doing this work since January, stringing concertina wire from the San Ysidro port of entry eastward. The Marines didn't make anyone available to speak on camera. Lieutenant Colonel Tyrone Barrione is in charge of the Marines deployed near San Diego. He says they have orders not to engage with migrants.
We have communication with Border Patrol directly. You saw some of them that are positioned across here. We notify them and we continue our work.
That work involves welding support rods to the fences and attaching concertina wire. Barrione compares it to a thorn bush. The Marines are from engineering battalions, essentially construction crews. The Marines we saw weren't armed. As of now, the military's deployment to the border is open-ended. Once the Marines finish reinforcing these fences, they say they're ready to go wherever the Border Patrol needs them next. From the border near the Otay Mesa port of entry, I'm Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Well, the rain is here. We've seen one storm kind of wrap up, and right after that, the next storm move in. I'll break down exactly what to expect with this next storm. But overall tonight, we're dropping down to the mid-50s, and of course, that rain continues.
Today, President Trump followed through on a promise to impose sweeping 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum products imported into the United States. The administration says the tariffs are designed to level the playing field for U.S. manufacturers. But KPBS reporter John Carroll talked to one local CEO who says the tariffs are harmful to business.
The high-span company in Chula Vista uses a lot of aluminum and steel in its products. When we paid a visit last week, President and CEO Eric Barnes was pessimistic about the looming tariffs. Today, he says the situation is worse.
Yes, there's been announcements of this tariff that goes into effect at this point in time, and that tariff goes into effect at another point in time. It's hard to keep up with them and hard to understand.
Hard to understand because Barnes's job is not to be an expert in tariffs.
We're supposed to be getting better at processes and designing products.
Barnes says he's worried we're now getting into a situation where things globally could easily spiral out of control.
What started as punitive tariffs targeting specific industries is rapidly growing into just this indiscriminate trade war with the rest of the planet. And, you know, as a company with a global footprint, I'm getting hit on all sides.
The overall effect of all the back and forth? Uncertainty. Something Barnes told us last week is horrible for business.
Uncertainty is you just up the risk factor. I think it paralyzes growth, it paralyzes investment if things are going to change on you.
One thing that seems certain at this point, the tariff situation will probably continue to change, which means we'll likely be checking in with Eric Barnes again. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Another industry tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel imports could affect here in San Diego affordable housing. Our biggest suppliers for lumber and steel are in Canada. Our media partner KGTV spoke to a contractor building an affordable housing complex in City Heights. He says the tariffs won't delay the project, but new projects in the not so distant future will be.
So when we get a proposal from a subcontractor that says it's only good for 7 days due to these unknown tariff cost increases, we may have to hold our proposal for longer than that. Our best chance at protecting ourselves is to add some contingency. It may be 10% on that line item. It could be as much as 15. And then when we go into contract with that developer, our first action is to write a subcontract to that subcontractor so that then they can go out and purchase all of those materials.
And Early told KGTV that he's not certain when the construction industry will feel the higher costs. He says there is still plenty of supply to be used up in the U.S. first. Inflation eased during February, but that may not be enough to calm consumers. As trade tensions put pressure on prices, economists warn of recession risks. Karen Kafa has the numbers from Washington.
Some good news for consumers. Grocery prices were fairly flat in February and gas prices actually fell. The not so good news, some economists described Wednesday's inflation report as the calm before the storm.
President Donald Trump pleased with the government inflation report that showed consumer price hikes easing for the first time in 5 months.
Very good news.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics said the consumer price index was 2.8% year over year in February. That's a slowdown from 3% year over year in January, but still higher than where the Federal Reserve would like it.
We're talking about a 2.8% increase in prices. So that's significant, and it's significantly away from where the Federal Reserve would like to be, which is closer to a 2% inflation target.
The data also too early to show the impact of President Trump's tariff policies. Many Democrats argue American consumers will be squeezed by moves like the 25% toll on all U.S. imported steel and aluminum that took effect Wednesday.
Because houses and cars are bundles of steel and aluminum and lumber and semiconductors, all of which this president is taxing. He is imposing an onerous tax upon the middle class right now.
Wednesday's tariffs were met with swift retaliation from Canada and Europe, fueling trade war fears among businesses and consumers and prompting some economists to warn recession odds are rising.
You know, the economy is strong. It came into the year doing very well, but it can't digest the kind of tariffs that we're talking about here.
Walmart, Target, Delta, and American Airlines are among major companies that say they've seen pullbacks in U.S. consumer spending this year.
In focus with Wednesday's inflation report, the price of eggs. Egg prices increased again in February, though at a slower pace than they did in January. Still, the price of eggs is up about 60% year over year. The entire inflation report, as well as the government's jobs report that released last Friday, food for thought for the Federal Reserve as they make their next decision on interest rates next week. In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
People in San Diego are already feeling higher costs from food, housing, and electricity. Now for our Why It Matters segment, Voice of San Diego Scott Lewis explains why water rates will also rise.
This week, the San Diego City Council voted to approve a 5.5% water rate increase. It was a tough one, and a couple of city council members couldn't bring themselves to do it.
I will not be able to support today's actions because I simply cannot justify charging water customers more than they already pay.
Unfortunately, it was just the small first increase of many to come in the next 4 years. The city of San Diego last year projected water rates will increase 61% through 2029, adding about $57 per month to the average water bill. That's almost $700 per year. That's the optimistic scenario. And it's not just the city. Rates will rise in other parts of the county as well. The San Diego region imports most of its water, and just like the water itself flows from the north, the water rate increases are flowing south as well. Why is this happening? In part, it's because we use less water, but that means we have to pay more to cover debts. The city of San Diego purchases most of its water from the San Diego County Water Authority, and the Water Authority buys most of its water from the Metropolitan Water District. But both those agencies have borrowed money to build infrastructure, pipes, pumps, dams. This creates an enormous demand for electricity as well to run the whole system. Electricity is much more expensive now. But San Diego has also itself taken on 3 huge projects that we're paying for. First, we bought a bunch of water from farmers in the Imperial Valley more than 20 years ago at a very high cost. Second, we built a seawater desalination facility and agreed to buy the water for decades at a much higher price than even the imported water. Third, San Diego and Los Angeles are both building large sewage recycling facilities. That will eventually lessen the need for imported water, but they are very expensive projects right now. The Metropolitan Water District also wants to build an enormous tunnel to bring water safely from Northern California to Southern California. That plan could cost $20 billion, and the bill would flow to ratepayers in San Diego. Leaders here hope to sell all the water we have bought to provide some relief. But if they don't do something soon, the backlash could lead to some extreme solutions. San Diego City Council member Marnie Von Wilpert shocked observers when she suggested last week that the city withdraw completely from the county water authority, or at least refuse to pay them.
So I believe we could send a very strong message and vote no and not pay the increased rates. Bring them to the table. Say, we're not going to accept this. I doubt my colleagues are going to agree with me, but in litigation, that's what we did all the time.
It's going to get heated. I'm Scott Lewis for Voice of San Diego, and that's why it matters.
Voice of San Diego is one of our partners for the Public Matters Initiative. You can learn more at kpbs.org/Public Matters. A new tenant protection ordinance is moving forward in San Diego County. Today, the Board of Supervisors voted to advance the measure proposed by Supervisor Monica Montgomery Stepp. Montgomery Stepp's office said it will prevent eviction actions against tenants for at least 7 days following the declaration of a local state of emergency. It applies to tenants impacted by emergencies such as floods and fires. If it is approved at the second reading next month, it would take effect immediately. And a reminder, ballots are arriving in the mail for the District 1 Supervisor special election. You can check out the Voter Hub at kpbs.org, and you can find answers to commonly asked questions, including, how do I know if I live in District 1? And take a quiz to see how the candidates align with you on important issues.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, the European Union and Canada announced retaliatory tariffs, escalating President Trump's trade war. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Hundreds of employees at the U.S. Education Department will soon be out of a job. It could be the first step toward eliminating the agency altogether, a move previously proposed by President Trump. Michael Yoshida breaks down who will the cuts impact.
The U.S. Department of Education cutting nearly 50% of its workforce. The layoffs, which started Tuesday evening, combined with those who already took voluntary so-called buyouts, will cut the department's headcount to nearly 2,200 employees. Education Secretary Linda McMahon saying this on Fox News when asked about the cuts.
That was the president's mandate. This directive to me clearly is to shut down the Department of Education.
The move drawing swift criticism from Democrats.
That's bad news for any American who cares about education for disabled children, about higher education, about a skilled workforce.
Fully eliminating the department would require Congress to act.
Oftentimes what's concocted in Washington, D.C. when it goes out to Montana doesn't exactly fit. So in a lot of cases, the states are better for administering the programs.
The Department of Education was created in 1979 to strengthen the federal commitment to ensuring access to equal education opportunities for every individual. The department has been responsible for things such as federal civil rights enforcement, student loans, and oversight of student disability rights. Senior officials say job cuts will not impact federal student aid, quote, in any way, shape, or form. Still, experts question whether the agency's duties can effectively be carried out with a diminished or even eliminated department.
They're not just federal budget line items. These impact real humans here.
In Washington, Michael Yoshida, KPBS News.
The Imperial Valley LGBT Resource Center is changing its name. KPBS Imperial Valley reporter Corey Suzuki says that's one of several decisions raising questions about the center's commitment to the trans community.
For almost a decade, a bright rainbow sign has welcomed visitors to the Imperial Valley LGBT Resource Center in El Centro. It's out at the entrance to the parking lot. Another version hung on the lobby. But in the last 2 months, those symbols of the LGBTQ+ community have been taken down.
The sign is new. We recently had the sign changed from Imperial Valley LGBT Resource Center to the Donnelly Community Services Center.
Rosa Diaz is the center's founder and CEO. She started the center in the mid-2010s after trying to get her church to do more to support kids who are questioning their sexual orientation.
Well, it didn't go very well, and after a while, I was no longer allowed to be in the position of ministry.
Diaz was a minister at the time, but because she came out as lesbian, she says the church took away her leadership role. Diaz decided to create her own Bible study group for LGBTQ+ people in the Valley. Pretty soon it started to grow. In 2015, Diaz decided to start a resource center.
I didn't know much about the LGBT population. I knew about myself being, lesbian, but there was nothing in my radar about rights. It was more advocacy for help, both mental and physical health.
LGBTQ+ resource centers have a long history across the country, but this one was the first of its kind in Imperial County, the only official physical place for the Valley's community. Other advocates in the region were excited. Kathy Molig is the executive director of Trans Family Support Services in San Diego. She says she met up with Diaz personally to try and figure out what they could do to support the new center.
It's not a matter of competition because there are plenty of people that need our services. So it's a matter of when we work together, we're stronger. And that's what we were hoping to bring to Imperial Valley.
But some people were a little more wary. They didn't feel like the center was welcoming to everyone in the broader LGBTQ+ community, especially when it came to trans people.
So I've met a lot of people who used to go to the center, but due to the toxic environment, very toxic environment that went throughout the years, people just left.
Andy Lopez is a former outreach worker at the center. She says some of the other staffers would repeatedly misgender her and other trans employees. Lopez says she reported those behaviors, but that Diaz never did anything to stop them. Eventually, she reported the center to the state civil rights department.
This is my lived experience with all the hate by somebody who promoted acceptance, but never honored our existence.
Diaz denies these allegations. She said Lopez never reported those behaviors to the center's leadership. But in recent years, Diaz has taken more public stances that are at odds with advocates for trans rights. In particular, Diaz says she's become more skeptical about some types of healthcare for trans people or gender-affirming care. She says she sought out information from two specific groups, GenSpect and Gays Against Groomers.
So it's really this rhetoric that involves, isolating trans people, attacking trans people as sort of delegitimizing them as part of the broader civil rights struggle.
R.J. Cravens is a senior research analyst at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which tracks extremism. He says these two organizations are hate groups, part of a broader network that's targeting the trans community.
Trying to delegitimize trans identity, call into question the general global medical consensus about gender-affirming care.
Diaz says she doesn't completely agree with what these groups say, but she says she wants to hear their perspective.
You can call them hate group just because they don't agree with you, or you can just say, yeah, well, they oppose me or they think differently, and that's America.
This past October, Diaz spoke out at an Imperial County Supervisors meeting against the new state law, one that had strong support from trans advocates. That law requires schools to get permission from students before sharing their sexual orientation or gender identity with their parents. Then, in December, Diaz announced the center was changing its name to the Donnelly Center, taking the name of a retired judge and longtime financial supporter. In the parking lot outside the center, they took down that bright rainbow sign and replaced it with a glassy ocean blue placard. Molik says it didn't come as a surprise, but it was disheartening. She and other San Diego LGBTQ+ leaders issued a joint statement condemning the decision.
There's not just the rebranding and the shifting of a mission of a center. There is a whole population within the county that is not serving because there's just not enough of all these providers.
Despite the criticism, Diaz remains defiant. Imperial County is big, she says. If other people don't think her center is serving the trans community, they should do it themselves. Already, some other advocates in the Imperial Valley say that's exactly what they plan to do. In El Centro, Corey Suzuki, KPBS News.
And tomorrow we'll have more on these new efforts to support the Valley's LGBTQ+ community. In Los Angeles, residents of Altadena and Pacific Palisades may face evacuation orders yet again. As Jasmine Veal reports, rain this week is bringing a risk of mudslides onto burn-scarred land.
So it's called an instant dam, and they're water activated.
Jenny Kay has some new tools on hand to protect her 103-year-old Sierra Madre Cafe from the rain arriving this week. She bought these flexible barriers that can divert water away from her business.
We have been in sort of a constant state of just stress and anxiety.
It's been a rough start to the year for Kay, who owns Mary's Market in this mountain community above the city. First came the Eaton fire, and now they face the constant threat of mud and debris flows.
For us, even just a rainstorm could be treacherous, but now with burn scars, lots of setting mud and debris, it's not just mud. I mean, there's branches, there's all kinds of things after the fire that could be pretty treacherous. But
a line of trucks moved down the mountain Tuesday, carrying away more debris from the Sierra Madre Dam so it doesn't overflow. In Altadena, LA County Public Works cleared out the mud from this debris basin on Cheney Trail, next to Jim Nuccio's nursery that was partially destroyed in the Eaton fire.
There's a certain scenes that are almost apocalyptic, like right here.
Nuccio, who lost some of his storage facilities and thousands of flowers, says despite being next to the burned hillsides, he's confident his business will be okay.
We had no problem with the previous storm. I took a walk up there last week, and there was no erosion, no damage to the back part of the property. So everything's fine that way. But again, more rain next couple nights.
Here at the top of 10 Noble Drive in Altadena, right next to the Altadena Crest Trail, these homes are surrounded by sandbags and K-rails. You can see what got swept down in last month's rainstorm. And in that catch basin behind that wooden wall, there is also just a ton of rocks and mud.
Hi, guys.
Back at Mary's Market in Sierra Madre, Kay says she is grateful, though, her business and home up here is still standing.
Pretty vulnerable area right now, but I don't know, we're just doing the best we can to keep it safe.
Well, with one storm out of here and the other one already moving in, we have a few things to talk about: the rain, the snow, and the advisories that have been issued. So let's dive right in, starting off with what to expect for tonight. Temperatures in the low 50s in Oceanside, mid 50s for San Diego. 30 degrees is your low in Mount Laguna. And of course, we have lots of precipitation to talk about. Tomorrow, that precipitation continues, even a few rumbles of thunder and lightning mixed in, especially along the coast. So keep that in mind that you don't want to be outside when there is lightning. We're in the upper 50s for Oceanside and San Diego. 36 is your high in Mount Laguna, 60 there in Borrego Springs. So let's time out the heaviest rainfall, first of all, because that's what's going to impact your day most. So most of this storm has really been focused to the north throughout our Wednesday. But as we go into the overnight hours, that moves further to the south. We see that heavier rain moving into the San Diego area. And then by the time we're up in the morning, it starts to move towards those scattered showers by noon. We're just left with the scattered precipitation. That will be the trend that continues as we go into the evening hours as well, as this storm moves its way further inland. Now, what exactly should you expect with the storm? We do have a flood watch in effect through Thursday afternoon. We're looking at 1 to 2 inches of rainfall for the San Diego area, which of course could cause some flooding, especially debris flows in burn scar areas are something that we want to keep an eye on. As far as the snow, Mount Laguna, we're looking at 3 to 6 inches. The higher snow totals, those are focused further to the north. The max snow total that we're seeing at Big Bear Lake, 12 to 24 inches. But this is accumulating snowfall. It'll help with the snowpack, something that, of course, we need, especially this late in the season. Now, we do have wind advisories out as well. This is through 5 p.m. Friday. We're looking at 20, 30, even 50 mile per hour wind gusts, which of course can have some big impacts. So something to keep in mind that there's a lot of wind associated with this storm as well. Taking a look at your extended outlook on the coast, we're warming up after the storm leaves and the sun comes back. We're in the mid 60s by the time we get to Sunday. Further inland, we even hit 71 by Sunday. The clouds are going to stick around a little bit, but we do see the return of some sunshine after the storm. A lot of this wind is going to be an issue in the mountains, especially Friday. We do see temperatures bounce around a little bit, but we get to 50 by the time we get to Sunday, but then drop again and the wind returns come Monday. Your desert 5-day outlook, warmer temperatures. Of course, we're get to the mid 70s just in time for the weekend. And of course, the sun returns as well. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather's Anna Azalian.
In Oceanside, a painter is pushing the boundaries of dreams, science, and her muse. KPBS arts reporter Julia Dixon-Evans spoke with Mary June about her art.
She calls them her girls. Each painting features a girl's profile, sprouting with machinery, botanical elements, and sometimes even buildings. These surrealist details stem from artist Mary June's vivid dream life and have shaped her paintings for 20 years. Last year, June was diagnosed with sleep apnea and began using a CPAP machine. But there was an unexpected consequence.
The moment I received the CPAP, like a month in, I lost all of my dreams.
Without dreams, June worried that her art would suffer.
What do we choose? Do we choose the thing that kind of ignites our creativity or our health?
Eventually, she found balance and her way back to dreaming and her girls. Her new exhibit includes paintings and large-scale, site-specific murals where CPAP machines, masks, and tubes swirl through each silhouette, a manifestation of June's new reality.
I hated this at first, but I am looking more like my paintings than I realized, and it made me love going through the process of the, a little bit of the nuisance of it, but I love it.
In Losing Sleep, I Painted by Mary June is on view Saturday through June 15th at the Oceanside Museum of Art. Julia Dixon-Evans, KPBS News.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. 5 years since the COVID-19 pandemic, NPR's Morning Edition is examining how our country is more prepared now for a future pandemic and a few things that have gotten worse. And KPBS Midday Edition has your weekend arts preview, including what to expect at the San Diego Latino Film Festival. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.